welcome to the show, everyone. Tonight we're talking to Gauthier and Alex, and they're with MUKN. You guys, I'm just going off the message I received from Dave. You guys are kind of streamlining app design. Is that correct?
Yes, somehow. That's a way to phrase it.
Okay, so what do we got going on? Break it down for me.
Alex, do you want to start or shall I?
Sure, I can start. So we're really focused on decentralized applications. So these are applications that are going to run on blockchains, and currently developing them is perilous, to say the least. If you make a mistake in your code because you're actually using crypto assets on these decentralized applications, bugs have cost people hundreds of millions of dollars because you're actually exposing the actual asset itself directly. So you don't want to make mistakes. And obviously, with people being the ones who are building most of these things, that's a difficult thing to avoid. So what we are doing at MUKN is building a language that abstracts the process of building decentralized applications so that they are automated in large part.
Hey guys, we just had a technical difficulty.
Did we?
We're good.
All right.
Yeah.
We're good. We're good. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. So by automating a lot of it, we take out a lot of the opportunities for people to make errors. And we can essentially build guide rails so that people who want to build decentralized applications to do whatever, change non-fungible tokens or trade their currency or whatever it is, can do so with a lot more security and safety than current development tools allow.
Okay.
Well,
I think you're going to need to.
Something to that maybe is that
You
people
might need
don't
to.
realize how the internet currently relies on centralized governance or centralized power. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that you either have to have a flawless protocol or you have to have a central authority that should be held accountable. It can be a government, it can be the state, it can be a private company, but at the moment this is very complicated to have a really safe decentralized internet. People don't realize how complicated that would be to do, and that's what we're trying to build at the moment.
I think you might need to break down the process a little further.
Oh, yes.
I know you guys saw me working on a computer, but that doesn't mean I know what I'm doing.
So to break it down differently, when you see the internet currently, if you want to say book a room on Airbnb, for example, you will need a company that would be held accountable if someone, for example, takes your money but doesn't deliver.
Okay.
Doesn't give you access to the room.
Mm-hmm.
You would need a bank account, for example. You need to be able to sue the legal entity that doesn't give you back your money if you're asking for that. These are examples of a centralized internet. So you are basically trusting a company or an entity that you believe to be trustworthy, and in exchange of this, you pay them, and in exchange of this, you have the service. So the problem is, this system is very safe, but it is highly corruptible. I mean, 2021 started like a case for a decentralized internet. You had people who, for example, were censored because of their political opinions on some social media. I'm not even judging the way they've been censored. I mean, private companies can censor whatever they want, but there are places where you cannot really safely express your political opinions. There are places where people lose their assets. You guys I know, are a bit into cryptocurrencies, and maybe you know that some people in this sector call that shitcoin. Some people sometimes build poorly designed cryptocurrencies, and people lose all their monies, not even on purpose. I'm not even talking about scams. I'm talking about poorly designed financial systems, and people usually invest in these systems and usually indulge in trading. Let's say I want to trade something with Alex, and a third person who could be malevolent sees that and says, oh, maybe I can take a share of that. I can have a bite of this cake. So at the moment, to have a trustworthy interaction with other people on the internet, you need to have a company or a state that guarantees the safety of your assets. But the problem is that it's a very common philosophical problem. It's been a philosophical problem for 2000 years. Who watches the watchman? Who is taking care of the accountability of the person that is accountable? Who's watching the authority behind that? And for that reason, some people decided to go around that. So in 2008, when they invented the Bitcoin protocol, that was exactly the original intent of the Bitcoin protocol. It's when you see the white paper of the original Bitcoin, not the token, not the cryptocurrency, but the protocol. It was really a peer-to-peer exchange between people who do not necessarily trust each other, but who will come to terms because they do trust each other. Even though they do not trust each other, they do trust the protocol. See, internet is a protocol. If I talk to you about your IP address, IP stands for Internet Protocol. If I tell you about HTTP, the TP from HTTP means Transfer Protocol. Basically, the internet is a giant protocol that tells the computers how they have to interact with each other so that the interaction happens safely. Bitcoin is also a protocol. So in the sector of cryptocurrencies, there's a difference between Bitcoin with a capital B and Bitcoin with a small b. The small b is the token, the kind of money that you trade, and the Bitcoin with big capital B is the protocol, the way people interact with each other. So later, many people decided that, oh, maybe we should do that with exactly the same idea as Bitcoin. Bitcoin is based on the fact that you cannot really falsify the network. You cannot really forcefully modify it. So it's very hard to hack this network because all around the world, the whole community is witnessing the registry of operations that they call a blockchain, the history of the transactions, and it's very hard to imprint a fake transaction. So totalitarian states have trouble seizing money from the Bitcoin network, but some people said, oh, what if we could do something else with that? Not only asset transfer, but not only money transfer, but also property transfer, or maybe genealogy, maybe completely decentralized applications that do not require being held on a server. You don't have to have armed guards at Google and a safe room where the data is, because the data is all around the world. It's a very distributed internet. The problem is that when this happened, they realized one thing, and here I'm going to quote the third man, which is the tech engineer behind the architecture of our star products. His name is Fare, but tonight he's not here. He's at his daughter's birthday. And Fare, to quote him, said, yes, a DApp is literally the hardest thing to program. A DApp stands for decentralized application, requires something like 7 or 8 experts, when a regular app like the one you have on your mobile phone, a regular app would require just one. So you will have to have lawyers, you will have to have experts in cybersecurity, experts in top-level mathematics, a few fields of mathematics, not only one, an expert in cryptocurrencies, and then also an expert in the app design. So all the experts on top of that of a regular app. So that's why it's very expensive, and that's why usually people underestimate a lot the way these dApps have to be built. And it could be $1 trillion market. At the moment, it's just $1 billion market. And why is that so? Because at the moment, people do not trust these dApps. They're very complicated. They're hard to use. And even if they were easy to use, they are not safe for the biggest part, because it's hard to program them. And we often quote an anecdote when we, the three of us, pitch our project in front of people. We quote an anecdote where our partner Fare, when he saw somebody at a convention using the wrong Ethereum address, so he shared cryptocurrencies, he transferred money from one address to another, and he just made a simple and very common mistake. He copy pasted the wrong address, and boom, the guy had lost $15,000 just like that. And the guy didn't even seem upset, because apparently that was something that was very usual to him. So basically what we did is that we automated these functions. We created a programming language that would allow you to make a DApp, even though you are not a very seasoned developer, and even though you're not an 8-person team, 8-person one-man squad. I mean, so it makes dApps much cheaper to do, to program, much easier to audit if you have to do that. And the applications would be limitless, because then it means that any person with an idea can do that. You guys know WordPress, right? For the internet. When people started using WordPress, they started building websites for a very cheap price because they didn't need a huge tool. You're not a developer, but you can still do something on WordPress. It will not be as neat as what a great developer does, but it'll be functional, and it'll be a tenth of the regular price for websites. And that's how many people with great ideas, but not with great skills and great budget, came to doing business on the internet. And it really was a revolution. And this technology, all the world of the internet, proceeds in little increments of new technologies that make every step much easier than the previous one, and that makes each new step a bit easier so that new people can enter this market and not being impaired by the constraints of the technicality of the very hard things that you have to learn when you are at the moment. When you're willing to do that, you have to be really a top-notch expert. And I think if you guys go online and just watch the team tab or the team page of any cryptocurrency company at the moment, you will see something like 15 guys who got a PhD in computer science. Most of them have done their PhDs on subjects that are, even for experts, a bit hard to understand and a bit tricky. Sometimes they don't even understand each other because it's very specialized. So we're trying to make this world a bit more mainstream, so that the next generation in a few years can see a decentralized Airbnb where you can book something from peer to peer without having to justify what you do to the company. Dave, I heard you the other day tell me about a person who wanted to go to a political event, and that person couldn't go there for just a simple reason, because the Airbnb website discovered what his political views were. Whatever you think about the political views of that person, it means that sometimes a decentralized application could help these people. Sometimes there would be people who would be happy to protect themselves from totalitarian governments. And in the world of finance, because of course, if we're talking about a technology, we're talking about its business implications. In the world of finance at the moment, there are trillions of dollars moving every year in the decentralized finance. And it's very complicated technologically. So there are billions of dollars in fees. And what we're doing is basically reducing fees by big order of magnitude. I would say it divides them by 100 around that. So that's the order of magnitude that you can imagine. So it would also really facilitate decentralized exchanges, stock trading, property transfer. And Alex here, who's a lawyer, could talk about so many very, very important legal applications as well. If you want to add something, Alex.
Well, I want to jump in for a second. If you guys simplify, I made up a word. I want to patent that, Mr. Alex, the lawyer.
It's a good one. That simplifies. There's uses for that.
Yeah, if you want to simplify the app making process, you mentioned WordPress, and that got my mind running. So you have websites that families build for their families. Say, all the family members post their holiday pictures on it, upcoming events, reunions, whatever. Sure. Imagine if apps become easier to make, where, say, someone just a hair smarter than me could functionally do it. You could have like a family app where there is an app, or a made to order neighborhood app, not where you're signing on to a website that's designed for it, where you could have your neighborhood is made to order, and the neighborhood has more input on the design of it. And, so, I mean, not just in the financial, although the financial is very important. We've seen a lot of shifty things done financially and restriction wise, as you mentioned. But I mean, this could boil down to where app making is personalized. It's a, like I said, a family app, or a teacher for their class might make an app that updates the students every year, and then the student downloads that app for that semester or year, and then the app's done. But then the student has a place they can go for the syllabus or notes or whatever else, or just to interact. I mean, that would be amazing if you could make an app so that it was accessible to people of less intelligence.
Well, just putting a profile picture to a cryptocurrency address could have saved that one guy $15,000, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Actually, is that right now most of what people are doing with cryptocurrency and smart contracts, all of that is great if you're a computer. Like, it works wonderful if you're a computer. If you are not a computer, it is complicated to deal with, 110-digit passphrase, or a security key, and all of these things. And these are major impediments to adoption. Like, most people are not going to want to deal with those things, and if they do deal with them, most people are going to have trouble with it. It's going to be hard. You're going to make mistakes, and even experienced people whose whole job is working with computers have, obviously, like our little story says, they've made mistakes with these. So they are not user-friendly at all. And that's really something that we want to focus on. Like, we want to make it so that you can, like, for us right now, we're just targeting like a routine, a programmer of ordinary skill, not a high-level programmer. But the long-term dream is exactly what you're saying. It's something where you can kind of plug and play. You're like, I want to have I make an app maybe for my family where we can share something that'll be private, that'll be secure, it'll be ours. Nobody else has any rights to it. Nobody else has any control over it. And you could conceivably do that down the road. Like, you could make it so you guys could trade things that are important to your family through that. Whether those are digital, like whether it's photos that are protected, or even potentially documents that you need to save that your whole family could. You could imagine doing things, legal documents, through a system like this, and that's something that could be possible, and those things would be protected and safe, because not only are they encrypted, but they're built in a decentralized way, so that any individual copy of it that gets knocked out won't lose your record, whatever you're trying to preserve or trying to make.
So yeah, it'd be stored in multiple places, and like you mentioned, WordPress has been quietly deleting people lately that don't share a popular political view. There's been blogs and writings and websites that have just been wiped out, and we're not talking far right extremists. We're talking kind of normal people that may just question something, and WordPress was kind of the home for every startup blog 6 years ago, and now it's going away.
Can you give us an idea of what differentiates these DApps and DApp frameworks that you're developing from, say, other DApp framework developers?
Sure. From a very, I know you're a bit familiar to code yourself, Dave. You told me you code a bit. I think that then maybe you'll be sensitive to this argument. Basically, for example, if you want to develop a DApp, there's one very well-known language known to anyone who develops DApps at the moment, which is Solidity, which is the language held by the Ethereum Foundation. So it's a very robust language, but what we've done in our language, named Glow, because the moon glows. I love when I do this pun, but that's the name of the language is Glow. Basically, what you write in Glow in a few lines, say 10 lines of code would take you something like 80 to 100 lines of code if you write that in a combination of Solidity and JavaScript, and you would need two languages at the same time. So I'm not saying that Solidity is obsolete, by no means. It's a great product, but we've improved the efficiency of the language. But you never know how Solidity is going to behave, for example, in 3 years. These projects are so new and evolving so fast that if somebody listens to this interview in a few years, they will probably say, oh, that's not right. What he says is not right anymore. Yes, probably. So I'm talking here and now. We're very proud to have a language that has a smart contract. So an interaction programmed between two people or more that is very easy to write, and that takes like 7 to 8 lines of code, when other languages would and other frameworks would take 50, 60, 80 lines of code, for example. And these languages usually require a few languages that aren't always synced with each other. Alex, did you want to add something?
Sure. I mean, one way to think about it, if you go back in the history of computers, right? Like, you go far enough back and everything was programmed in binary, right? People like using punch cards to do ones and zeros. And eventually somebody got the idea that, like, hey, perhaps if we make something else that will encode these ones and zeros that uses actual human words, that'll be easier. And that's kind of the history of computer language development, right? Like, people write a language that does one thing, and then they realize, well, if we step back a little bit more and abstract over the top of that other language, we can do even more things and have more control without having to get so deep into, you know, like, what exactly does a series of 8 ones and zeros mean to the computer here? And we're getting to the point where these languages are getting very sophisticated, but in the blockchain space, we haven't added these levels of abstraction. So the languages are very powerful, but you're still kind of like, not as far as binary, but you're still doing a lot of nitty-gritty technical details that at a higher level of abstraction you won't have to, because they'll just be automated. And that's what Glow does. It allows you to zoom out in a way that you don't have to deal with every single piece of the Solidity code, because Glow does it for you.
So Glow basically takes Solidity, creates tons of libraries that can efficiently move a person's idea from thousands of lines of codes to maybe hundreds.
Yes, but Glow is not built on Solidity. It's a different technology.
Can it run with Solidity?
Oh, it's been designed. We're very we value collaboration. Actually, it's funny because the story of the company is that unlike most other companies, we don't only have computer science PhDs. We have one expert in law, which is Alex, and who understands the issues of trust between people who have to come to terms, but from a legal and philosophy of rights point of view. Myself, I do this as a psychotherapist and a coach, and I've been doing this as a communications expert. I came to companies where basically the communication was very dramatically poor, and the problem is that it was jeopardizing the whole company. So that was my job as well. And Farid, our lead tech engineer, the one who supervises the architecture of Glow, he did that from a game theory and computer science point of view. So the merging of these three philosophies is what brings us to this. So what we want to do is to have a very portable language that could run on any blockchain. That's one of the specificities of our language. So you don't have to choose and to gamble the future of your DApp. If you say, for example, oh, I would like to have this run on the Ethereum network. Okay, let's imagine that in a few years, you have spent a lot of time and lots of money on that, and the Ethereum blockchain becomes obsolete for whatever reason. It could be a regulation from the state. It could be something completely different, like
gas fees.
What?
High gas fees.
High gas fees, yes, of course, yeah. At the moment, the fees are gigantic and became gigantic because they have scaling problems. That's why some of the founders of Ethereum came to found Cardano, and some others came to found Polkadot. And each generation is more complex and more, let's say, less and less wasteful in terms of energy. And that's why I always dislike the argument that Bitcoin is taking too much energy. Yes, of course, but if you look at the primitive cars, look at the return on investment in terms of energy, how much gasoline you had to put in the engine to actually run a mile, drive a mile. It was really problematic compared to what we have now. So it's the same thing. Efficiency gets better, but the problem is that if you had built something on a previous technology, then you're basically gambling the company on the fact that this the company or the DApp or your little project on the fact that maybe this blockchain is going to become obsolete, this network is going to become obsolete. So we're trying to have a language that is as portable as possible and that can work with as many other languages as possible. So somebody programming in Solidity, let's say that person's taste drives that person towards Solidity. Well, that person could invoke functions written in Glow in a Solidity code with no problem. That's the grail we're looking for, and that's what we're working for every day in the company. So we're really willing to collaborate with many people, and we have more potential partners than competitors, actually.
Okay.
And,
Someone
and right
has,
now, yes, we do. You can compile for Ethereum onto the Ethereum virtual machine with Glow now. And in the future, we're going to expand and reach a lot more blockchains and languages. That's a major goal for us. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh no,
Please,
you're good. You're good. Right now, I am the voice of the moron in this conversation. I have no clue what
Yes,
anyone
you
is
do.
saying. Now, I have heard of Python, but Cody Joe says this sounds like a lot of SaaS. I don't know if that's I don't know what that means. But anyways, I have heard of Python because I have smart siblings and nieces and nephews, but I have never seen it. SaaS offerings already out there that only require Python. There is even managed blockchain services from AWS. Now, I think that what you're saying is this is simplifying the code, whereas other productions of code take more lines, take more code essentially, or more commands written, where Glow will simplify that. Is that going to be done kind of like you got that Unreal Engine 4 that supposedly you could download and build your own game off of or something? Is it going to be a lot like that, where it's kind of a selection process where you can kind of add in your own stuff, but there's a lot of templates built?
That's the goal.
That is the goal, but bear in mind that you mentioned Python, for example. You could really program a DApp in Python and in Glow at the same time. What we are focusing on at the moment is the most critical aspect of a DApp, which is the financial interaction and the interaction in general when you have to exchange data or assets with people. So if it's a free DApp, and it's only about playing a video game, for example, it could be just exchanging data, which is already something that is critical. And that's why we focus on that, because what we want is to improve the safety, always the safety first. For example, you could program your DApp in Python, but invoke some functions in Glow, the ones that are impossible to do in Python without, well, in Python, I think you would need not 100 lines of code, but maybe 1,000 lines of code to program for the blockchain, because it's not really a proper language for that. But it would be a great language for statistics, artificial intelligence, for example, or other things. Python is great. I love it. But it wouldn't be, it would be for the main part of your DApp, like how the DApp works, and we wouldn't do, for example, the graphic design of your interface in Glow as well. This is not the point. We're really doing something that we're offering a huge library for the people who really want to have safe DApps. We put them on guide rails.
So
Now-
we're focused on the part of your code that's going to talk to the blockchain directly, and the part of your code that talks to that part, because you have to go out a little bit from it. So, but that's the part where if you're building one of these decentralized applications, any currency, any tokens, anything of value will be exchanged, and we are going to build that portion of it, and then you'll put whatever web design, whatever other graphics, whatever you want on the other side, the stuff that doesn't deal with the blockchain. And Glow.
So what you're doing when you mean with the blockchain is not just cryptocurrency, but any means where the data is stored. You're building the connections for that data to communicate.
And I think here's where we need to work on communication. Where you're saying DApps are not apps. DApps are different. And probably most people in our audience don't know the difference between a DApp and an app. And I'll tell you what, maybe we could get a good explanation on that, and that'll clarify some things, because this is really important for our future. I don't think people understand quite the capacity for a DApp to interact with our society and just totally undercut lawyers and the middlemen that really brain drain our society, because people that do those career fields could go off and do
Be
much
nice,
more.
one of our guests are.
I'm sorry.
You
Oh,
can
that's
always
right.
disparage lawyers.
Did I say lawyer?
We meant bad lawyers, evil lawyers, not the good ones. Not the good ones
Okay,
with beards and cool hairdos.
So,
But think of these
Maybe
people
let's try to
with
define
high
a
capacity
blockchain first.
jobs that require lots of IQ power, right? And these people are pushing paper as middlemen for, arbitration or whatnot. Imagine if we released them into like scientific fields.
Or like safety guys.
Honestly, I
Hey, now.
do think
If you're not safe, what are you, Jared? So
I
go ahead.
think
Let's talk about DApps. I want to know what the
Okay, okay.
difference between a DApp and an app is.
First of all, I would like to say that I love the ambience here. I love the atmosphere. Like I'm feeling that we're talking about philosophical subjects and high and complex technologies while having a beer, even though we're separated from 1,000 miles or something.
Right.
No, 10,000 miles. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. But yeah, talking about DApps. Maybe it's good to define what a blockchain is because many people do not understand what it is. You see, in the primitive times, people had a kind of registry. Maybe you have seen sometimes vintage movies where people do genealogy saying, okay, you, Dave, son of Paul, Paul, son of son of Paul and grandson of David the First and things like that. Sometimes people just call themselves like that, and it's something that you can still see in Russia. For example, if your name is Vladimir and your father's name was Dimitri, sometimes they will call you, hello, Vladimir Dmitrievich, and that's the way they will address you. So there's a sense of history. What a blockchain is basically a sense of history for the interactions between people. Let's say, for example, that Jared paid that beer. He paid that beer with $1. The dollar comes from Dave. The dollar also comes from me, and the dollar then came from Alex. So everyone knows that Jared paid a beer with the dollar that he got from Dave, that Dave got from me, and that I got from Alex. And everyone knows that. So if Jared introduces a fake dollar in the equation, everyone will say, no, we know that this is not this is not possible. We know that the only dollar that you got is the dollar that you got from Dave, who got it from Gauthier, who got it from Alex, who got it from another person before that. This is a registry that everyone shares. Everyone acts as a witness, so that it's very hard to falsify this.
Yeah, it's not just that, but a fake dollar can't even enter the system. Because
technically it could technically, but at the moment, for example, to hack the Bitcoin network to introduce a fake dollar, it would require a huge computing power, something like which is for most people unimaginable. it's very complicated to figure out the numbers because, okay, to give you a number, if you took all the computers from the Chinese government, the US government, and Google together, it wouldn't probably be enough if they were 100% focused on that.
Well,
So
yeah.
technically,
So yeah, I mean, it can be done, but it wouldn't.
unrealistically.
It would be so expensive to do that because you would have to trick all of the blockchain at once, right?
Yes. And
Or
to be
a
sure that,
majority at least. Yeah.
yeah, the majority of it, and to be sure that people usually validate the network, you have to work against the laws of thermodynamics. You have to, you have to use your computer to solve little mathematic problems to validate the security algorithm. So it's so this is what they call proof of work in the Bitcoin industry. And if you guys, if you people who are listening to us have ever heard about Bitcoin mining without knowing what it is, this is what it is. Bitcoin mining is lending a fraction of the power of your computer, or sometimes building a computer just for that, just to make the network work and be safe. The problem is that it was a bit primitive, so other people decided that, for example, some operations could happen not really on the blockchain, but outside of the chain and be validated maybe later. For example, if let's say Jared gives me $10 and I give him $5 back, and ultimately we can sum it up just saying that Jared gave me $5. And it's instead of writing many transactions in the blockchain, just writing the final outcome. That's one example of the things they thought about to optimize the energy costs. There are many others. Some of them are extremely tricky and sometimes beyond my understanding. Like, I see how it works, but I don't see how it works in the details. So it's a bit hard for me to explain them, but to explain that, yes, that is what a blockchain is, and there are many ways, such as proof of work or proof of stake or other things, to validate that and to make it
So
safe.
let me jump in here, and getting back to your initial question, what's a DApp? How is it different than a regular app? Right? So if we wanted to write an app, we would just sit down at a computer and we would write it, and most likely it would reside on that computer. The original code would be on the computer we wrote it on, right? Or maybe we get fancy and we want to put it on Amazon's server, but then it just sits on Amazon's server, and that's where it is. Like, if we go and delete that server, or if we delete the memory of that computer, the application's gone.
Or if Amazon chooses to delete it for you.
Or if Amazon chooses to delete it for you. Or if Amazon screws up and deletes it for you.
Or if your computer where you wrote the app on gets damaged, you lose it then.
Yeah, exactly. If your kegerator freezes and bursts a pipe and blows up your computer, you're toasted, right?
Yep.
It's gone. So
yeah, we're dealing with that right now.
I think a lot of people are.
I'm kind of heartbroken. Anyways, go on. Sorry.
So, if you want to make that program harder to delete, you take the code you wrote, all of that core code, and you copy it onto another computer and another computer. And the more computers you put it on, the better, right? Because you have to delete all of them. And then you make them talk to each other, and they all check with each other to make sure that the code matches.
Make sure that it's still in good shape. They communicate with each other.
Exactly. Because it is a little bit like a photocopy, right? Like, a photocopy gets worse over time, and that's not exactly the same as a computer program, but there is some degree of that. Like, as they duplicate, there's a risk, at least, you're going to have some changes. Things are going to happen. Bugs will occur. And so
there's degradation as dust builds up on the glass screen.
Exactly.
But
and then you have them check with each other to verify that all the copies are accurate. And if you put your computer, the program that you build, you break it out that way, that is, in essence, what a DApp does. So instead of taking your program and having it live on one place, it's distributed over a bunch of places. And the most convenient way to get that decentralization is to use blockchains. That's their whole purpose. And using the blockchain, you can write potentially you could write any program that exists now could also run on a blockchain. Only then it wouldn't be a code that lives in just one place or one server, but it would live on the internet, which means that nobody, no single entity, and even most groups would have no power to delete it and get rid of your program. So it makes it much more rugged and robust than just writing an application that you sits on your own computer.
And for an example of a DApp that might run on, say, let's say I build a coin called Ethereum something or other. And
For example,
on top of that blockchain, as people are exchanging tokens, keeping it alive, I write a DApp that when I die, instead of Hillary Clinton getting to do the death tax on all my wealth just automatically transfers over to Gauthier. And there's nothing the government can do about it because it's already programmed in the DApp. It's on the blockchain, and there's no way to cut that off. The only triggering mechanism would be my death has to be registered somewhere, and that's what activates the DApp. And that's just one example of what these DApps can do and how they can undercut these centralized systems.
Actually, if I may jump in and make a little advertisement for our language Glow. Did you know we have a language called Glow? No, actually, we have a few smart contracts that are already live on Glow, and one of them, which is it already live, Alex, or is going to be soon live, which is called the Dead Man Switch. You know, the name comes from the people who are driving trains. If they fall asleep or stop pressing the button, the train stops to avoid very dangerous accidents. Mm-hmm. So this is what you call a dead man switch. And if you don't check every year on the blockchain, then the money gets released. And that's what you're saying here is a typical dead man switch contract. You don't have to manually enter that the person has died. You just have to say if that person didn't check on the blockchain every year or so.
Every period of time, whatever the
release the money
dictate
at this address. That was what they call the colored tokens in the early Bitcoin protocol, and now it's much more refined, and you can do many things with that. So that could be also my money has to go to the foundation of my choice. You could say, okay, maybe I want Doctors Without Borders Association, this NGO, to get the money if I die. I want it to be directly done like this. It can be done You can transfer property and real estate as well. In France, some people are thinking about it to save some fees, some legal fees, because in France, if you buy, let's say, $100,000 apartment, you will pay something like $9,000 or $8,000 in legal fees just to have the right to buy it. So some people want to automatize that to allow people who are not very rich to still become owners of their own homes.
In France, do you guys pay taxes on property owned every year?
Yes, you have two taxes. You have one which is based on even if you rent the house, you have to pay it. And another one which is based on the fact that you only inhabit the house, you own it, and you have to pay it again.
So you guys suffer under the same things that we do here in the States, which is there's no such thing as property ownership. You're just renting it. All right. Yeah, I've often wondered if we picked out, say, an ultra wealthy bad guy. I'm just going to throw a name out there. We'll say his name is Dill Bates, and we wanted to bankrupt him. We could all just deed our property over to him for a year and let him pay all the taxes on that, and then, corrupt and tear him down. But, that's just a fictional person and a fictional idea. Of course, it would take the cost of everyone giving up their personally owned property. But, yeah, just throwing it out there.
Right. He would find tax exemptions program.
I imagine he would. But I would like to see him. But then we would be making his he would have to hire at least another army of of accountants, and I would at least be transferring money from him to some accountants. So
See, you're assuming that the justice system works equally for everybody, Jared.
you know, that is true. That is true. And in the end, we would be going to the justice system to have the justice system adjudicate that the justice system did wrong. Yeah,
That's
probably
It's
a
not
bad
very
idea.
good at that.
You know what? It really is not. Shockingly, it really is not.
That's a universal problem. That's something that works the same way in every country, because it's not a problem of how you shape your legal system. It comes from the very structure of the legal system. Every centralized legal system, it's really an epistemologic problem. Epistemologically, there is absolutely no legal system that doesn't put you in a form of endless recursion, like who's checking the accountability of the system that checks all the other problems of accountability, and you have to go to do it like that. In France, for example, we have le Conseil des Sages, which means the wise man's council. It sounds like a Lord of the Rings thing, but it's basically all the old presidents.
An elf and an ant and whatever else sitting up there.
Yeah, and they just sometimes they can ban a law saying, no, president, you shouldn't do that, because we, as the former presidents and and prime ministers, say that it's not a very good idea, so don't do that. But in the end, who checks this council of wise guys? Nobody. But it's the same in any authority. You could say the same thing about communist China. You could say the same thing about Hong Kong or Germany or the US, independently of what you think to be the best system and the best way to organize the legal life. There is always a problem of pyramidal structure, and some people have tried to do to implement DApps in a way to organize decentralized governance and legal battles to settle them. But maybe, Alex, you have more information than I have, probably.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, but I'm gonna actually take a detour, because I feel like, you know, we talk about trust being part of our thing, and with a Tooele-based podcast, I feel like I have to come clean that I'm like a Roy High School, Utah graduate, class of 1997, and I feel like that needs to be disclosed. Just to make clear here.
I think when I was in high school in Grantsville, we played you in football.
You may very well have.
I believe so. Were you 3A or 4A back then?
So we were 4A back when I was there. So.
Okay, so no, we didn't play you.
Yeah.
I think we played Syracuse.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're a near neighbor. So.
Yes, right there next door.
Yep.
Anyway, so go on. You're from Roy. So you're from Utah. That's outstanding. We got a Utah boy on here. That's how he got the Salt Flats.
Yep, that's exactly it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And he knew how to say Tooele.
That's impressive.
We should have just called that right off the bat.
That was a big clue, you know.
Yeah.
So for the going back to Gauthier's point about decentralized governance and stuff, there's a whole bunch of ideas that are around there about ways that blockchains can be used to implement larger decision-making processes. Wyoming just passed an interesting law about DAOs, which is like a decentralized organizational structure that is you can think of it kind of like a new way of forming a company, only it's based on tokens and votes of the people who own the project and can make decisions about how the project should go forward through that ownership. And so there's a whole bunch of interesting ideas, and a lot of them are used right now, are focused commercially, obviously, but not all of them. And some of them there's some really interesting ideas in the space about ways that can be used for government, to make people in a community, to allow people in a community to have a much higher resolution say over what decisions their community makes.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm not a fan of democracy on the whole. I think democracy enslaves the minority. but I am a fan of. I think as long as you can boil a community down to the smallest size it can be to achieve the goal, is where you can have a better system. And I think I don't know, anytime you get more than two people, a democracy fails, because it's two wolves and a sheep discussing what's for dinner.
Right. Well, and I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it's obviously a hard problem and one that nobody has found a perfect solution to, because the reality is there isn't one, right? Like there's the existing solution, and there's the compromise that you find, but I don't think anybody's ever going to find like a magic perfect solution to all of this.
No.
The idea, I think, is to really create a process that empowers as many people as possible, that lets as many people have a real say, and that does watch out for, like you said, like an obvious defect of a pure democracy is that there's a tyranny of the majority, and the minorities get boxed out, and you got to try to build your system in a way that counteracts that to the extent you can, with the understanding that you're never going to be perfect at it.
Yeah, I think that was the design behind the Constitution, was we're going to write laws so that this government enacts as little as possible, so that democratic processes introduced can't affect that much. It's just that the government does what governments do, and they encroach on that, and they say, well, it didn't say anything about this, so we'll just do that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Like, this is Madison's idea, right? Is pitting all the different interests of all the people who are vested in the government against each other, so that nothing can get through that doesn't have a lot of support. And unfortunately, I think, like, you're right. Like, we're in an issue where we've got this two-party system, and the parties have created a system where they get to pick their voters. And where if they didn't get to pick their voters, you might have some accountability. But they do, so you don't.
I think you're correct. We do have a two-party system. I think it's the government versus the people, but they pretend to be separate to separate us, so we don't see that they're all working towards the same goal, such as sending money to Pakistan transgender issues when there's an economic crisis over the horizon.
It's hard to do that with a DApp, I bet.
Well,
to take my
honestly,
money and give it to someone else.
Well, it's hard, but it could be done. I mean, in Venezuela, for example, they had a problem. Well, Venezuela was a lucky country. For sometimes they used a cheat code in the video game jargon. They benefited from the inflation of the monetary mass and the skyrocketing prices of the gallon of oil. Balanced a few of the economic mistakes, but in the end, some people really ended up in a very problematic situation in Venezuela, and were really back to a long forgotten situation of starvation. And some people used Bitcoin to buy some primary goods. So sometimes toilet paper, yes, but most of the time medications, for example, or sometimes critical foods that you couldn't find anymore and that some people required just to live, like proteins. And sometimes the government came in the houses and seized the computers used to trade Bitcoin. So it's not impossible, and there's absolutely no perfect system against coercion. And I don't even think there's going to be a non-violent society where there's going to be an issue. But what I do advocate, though, is a system where people are aware that there are many of different possibilities to organize life together with many people, with people who can think very differently and have many very different political opinions. I think it's very hard not to be sacrificial or violent, even if you are viewing yourself as a hardcore libertarian, but the fact that you know that it's very hard to be non-violent really helps you doing that. So I don't think democracy is necessarily a problem. I think forced democracy as something that, as if you couldn't choose something else, would be a problem, because there's not one democracy. There are tens of thousands of ways to organize that, and there are many other systems as well. So I think what the decentralized internet can bring is variety, many ways to open one's mind, so that a person gets a political culture, because that person sees on this decentralized internet that there are many other ways to decide and to interact with other people that are not necessarily the one that that the person thought were the only ones to be available to mankind. And it changes something. That's why usually most totalitarian governments usually ban travel abroad, because if they don't do that, then people come back to the country and say, I saw something differently, and I don't think I'm going to accept that anymore, because I've seen that in other countries. They don't do it like that. I'm not even saying this about political or economic issues. I'm saying this even about, family issues. Sometimes you live in a social background where there are implicit things, and you don't see how they are problematic, but then you just leave your how do you call that, your ecosystem. You go to another one, and when you come back, you see, oh, okay, you see things that you thought to be immovable, impossible to change, and you think to yourself, oh no, this is possible. So I think that the decentralized world can bring a very open market with many different philosophies of governance as well. I mean, there are many blockchains dedicated to decentralized governance as well, such as EOS and Decentraland, Decred, Kleros. But if you look at them in the detail, they don't share the same paradigm. They are very different. To how do you aggregate individual decisions in a collective decisions? Well, you cannot. There's even a math theorem about this made by Kenneth J. Arrow that basically disproves the possibility to aggregate individual wills into one common will or one common general interest. So there's no greater good, nothing. You cannot prove the existence of a greater good. So at least the good thing is that now you have many ways of envisioning a greater good, so that you don't get too dogmatic about it. And that's one of the underlying beauties of the decentralized internet that I believe that will really bring a revolution to the world. It's not something fancy. It's not as powerful as just saying, oh, I have an uncensorable messaging app, or I have a financial app that can, allow people to save millions of dollars every year. These things are great business wise, but I think the very long-term revolution is that people will get more aware of the fact that, oh, okay, if I have to live with other people, and if there's no reason to break their consent, and sometimes I don't have a choice. So how do I do? Oh, there are many ways to do it. Okay, I'm not going to be, I think people are going to just let go of the idea that there's one good way to organize the civil life, by seeing that there are many ways to do it. But for that, you have to have an uncensorable internet, and not an education that force feeds you that this way of life is good. I live in France. Probably you guys know that in France, the French press criticizes the US a lot. But you guys in the US probably hear lots of critics from subsidized press saying that, oh, the French government is not that good, and probably the same thing in Russia. But what if we all had something different? We weren't forced fed the idea that there's only one way to organize the civil life. And but you told me, okay, maybe we're going to make scenarios. I'm thinking like maybe 15, 20 years forward.
I love how you guys came on here to talk about your new plan, and I steered us off into the weeds. I tend to do that. But I'm waiting for the day when your community of choice may be an internet. So there may not be geographical nations, but ideological nations or ideological communities built through the internet. And I think that would be an interesting day where, as our life moves further into the internet, our money is already based in the internet, regardless of whether they print it or not. It's based there. That's where it's exchanged. That's where all of that happens. I wonder if there will be a time where there will be communities of choice, where you can look around and select your community and not have to have the caloric expenditure to physically move there, but there can be negotiated agreements to make that happen.
Maybe. Then we're thinking like many years forward and very far from.
Yeah.
We're stemming very far from the main project, of course.
That
because
is
at the
true.
moment
That is true.
Well, I'll leave you with this though. Your product, Glow, is a highly versatile language that works to build DApps, like a framework structure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, when the internet came into existence, TCP/IP was not the only internet protocol proposed. In fact, it wasn't even the best internet protocol proposed. But what happened was the person pushing TCP/IP was a really good marketer. You know, you spend 10% inventing your product, and the 90% beyond that, that's all marketing and pushing and getting your voice out there and telling people about this product. Now, I want you guys to know that 10% of your energy will go towards developing this product, and the other 90%, in order to be successful, will have to go to you guys out there pushing your product on podcasts and TV shows and radio shows, and you're going to have to market the crap out of this. And the world will be a better place if you do, because I really don't know many companies developing products like this. And I'm looking forward to seeing what's published in the near future. I will probably be someone who dabbles in this language and tries to fathom it so I can do something productive with the cryptocurrency that just sits in my wallet.
Well, hopefully someday you'll be able to write a turtle and Dogecoin casino all in Glow. But honestly, that's also one of the difficulties of such a product, is that most people won't even know about it. I mean, let's imagine you are an expert in the art of refining steel. You make a new kind of steel that is 20% lighter and 50% more resilient, 50% tougher. I mean, if you go to the supermarket, nobody will hear about the name of this new type of steel. But 10 years from now, this type of steel will make the soda cans. It will make maybe the cars. It'll make the new bridges. Everyone will use the product, but nobody will ever know that. I mean, most people cannot name the companies that produce the steel of the bridges, cannot name the companies that produce the components of a motherboard. And of course, some people know the guys, the companies that build these motherboards or the graphic GPUs. People know NVIDIA and Intel because there are some commercials, but the components, the way we mine the copper, every technological revolution is usually based on a few or sometimes a huge number of equally important technological revolutions that nobody will never ever hear about, because that's not what they use in their everyday life. And yet there are probably countless technological revolutions that we use without even knowing how important that was.
So you guys are, what you're saying is you're building a background that other companies will use your background base, such as coach companies. Everyone knows Oldsmobile or Chevy, but they don't know the coach company that builds the cabin of their car. Or
yes,
right. Yeah.
Okay.
And if you want to check out our stuff, you're interested after our conversation.
Yeah, let's
you can
throw the
check out our
websites up.
language. Yeah, so our language Glow is available at glow, GLOW, dash lang, LANG.org. And if you're interested in finding out more about our company Moon, you can find us at MUKN.io.
And it'll be in the show notes. We'll have hot links to go directly to their information websites. Anything they want to include in the show notes. That way, you know, you can go there whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to it on iTunes. Just open up the show notes. There'll be a hot link so you can go right to it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for having us.
No, this is real. Now, granted, most of this went way over my head. Way over my head. I'm a Neanderthal, but I like the idea of security, decentralization, and usability. And it sounds like you guys are meeting those marks. Now, granted, I will probably never be a first-person user on this, but I know that I figure you'll see me using this from an end user who tied it into their system, because I've heard of Python, don't have a clue what it is. I've just heard of it, and I know you use it to write programs.
Well, the truth is, I don't know if I'll ever write a program in Glow, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is not what I bring to the company. That is not my area of expertise. But if you're somebody who does web design, if you're somebody who is, not like a PhD level programmer, but does some development, has some experience with coding, that's what we're shooting for. We're shooting to make it so that you could write DApps and decentralized applications that do what you want to in a way that is safe and allows you to have these capabilities. And like the vision, the thing that makes me really excited about this is honestly very small. Like if you think about an Etsy shop, right? But like right now, if you have an Etsy shop and you're outside of the US, if you're outside of the US or the US and Europe, or you're somewhere in the developing world, like you're never going to be able to sell your Etsy shop. Just doesn't have a chance of going anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's going to be so many middlemen that there's going to be a huge markup. You'll never be able to get around. But potentially, like somebody with an Etsy shop in Nairobi could build a DApp with Glow and could open up a global market for whatever they're making, and without a middleman in the middle. So like you and I could go on their website and order and pay them directly. They're going to get the full profit for what they've made, and we can get these cool products that are unique and impossible to get for where we are otherwise, and directly from the people who made them. And that's something that I think is amazing. It's something that really excites me about it.
What about for okay, we all heard about what happened to Parler a month and a half ago, right? How they were on Amazon servers and just got shut down.
Yeah.
That's the case for the DApp world.
For the DApp, that would mean that you have a website that is stored in multiple areas. So your computer may be down, but your buddy across the world, Gauthier, his computer may be running, so that would provide the server access at that time. Is that correct? Could that happen
Yes.
that way? So there wouldn't be the need to go to a large evil corporation to buy a server from them, where you could kind of intrinsically amongst you and your friends build a server farm that's worldwide, that's international, that because of the time zones is always on and always functioning, and someone's accessing your website through your computer working as a server, but you're done with it, you shut it down to save the calories, and it automatically bumps to another common computer to server the program, just finds the next one down the circuit, and on and on and on.
Yes.
And that I think is the ultimate part, because that takes control back to the populace of the internet.
Some people even think that these technologies would really help third world countries, developing countries, because sometimes some of these countries are basically, you talked about the metaphor of two wolves deciding who they are, what they are going to have for dinner. The problem is that sometimes some governments of big powers, and I'm not saying that it's intrinsic to one government. I mean, every government, when it tends to get bigger, tends to have, let's say, long claws and interests all around the world. For example, France has a history, my country has a history of colonization, and that's why many people in Africa speak French. Mm-hmm. The sad history is that basically sometimes we exploited these countries. I'm saying we without feeling any guilt. It happened like 200 years ago, and it was something that every country has done.
Are you trying to I can't talk. I've had too many beers already. Advocate your guilt over something that happened by maybe not even your ancestors? Is that what you're saying?
No. I don't feel any guilt. I'm saying precisely that I.
No, I'm giving you a hard time. I'm giving you a hard time. No,
I'm not feeling any guilt. Just like I don't think any Chinese person should feel a guilt for the Japanese. Any Japanese person should feel any guilt for the Chinese genocide that happened before they were born. But the fact is that every big empire should be kept in check, but most of them cannot be kept in check. That's the problem, is that to disrupt the problem of magnitude 5, you need a solution of magnitude 6, and then you're going to have a new problem of magnitude 6. That's why when I hear people saying, "Oh, we should dismantle Google," okay, who's got, like, the only entities that have the means to dismantle Google have more blood on their hands than Google has, and even then it would be more problematic.
Do they have the means? You would have to get every government in control. Now, about corruption of governments, government is corrupt regardless of where you are. I think in the developing world, it's just more direct. You actually deal with a government official, where here in the United States, they have go-betweens, such as the IRS or some branch of law enforcement, where
bureaucracy, yes.
In a developing country, say in Northwest Africa, you would actually have interaction with that government official.
Yeah, as you pay him.
Is the corruption the same? Yes. I think the argument is the corruption worse? And I don't know. I don't know whether it is. At least that corruption you see, and it's in your face.
Yeah, it's more visual. I tell my wife, she thinks Brazil is worse than America. I'm just saying, honey, you don't see what's going on behind the curtains in America, because the curtains are so long and thick.
Yeah.
In Brazil, they're a little shorter, and you can kind of peekaboo underneath.
But right now,
it tends to get like that the bigger the system gets.
Yes. And right now, we're looking at a growing control from multinational, super huge corporations such as Google, such as, name the multinational huge corporation, mostly Google. I mean, that's the one that comes to mind in everybody's. This is a way to defeat that, where Google's pinning a market on everything internet. They own YouTube. They own the entertainment there. They own the opinions that the populace is allowed to hear, right or wrong. They own that. And they become a backdoor for the government to subjugate the populace. This is a way to beat that.
Yes. By the way, it happens also in China. Maybe you've heard of Xiaomi or Tencent.
It
Tencent
happens
is a
more
company
in
that
China.
is basically the same as Google, but in China.
Yeah, it happens more directly in China. I shouldn't say more in China. It happens more directly and more abrasively. But this is a way to beat that. This is the way to beat. Right now, the Chinese, if I remember, I read a story on this. They open up short-term kind of chatting apps that were designed around game chatting or just whatever, and that's used as a market to criticize their government for a short term until they notice the government finds them, and then they move to another one, and they move and move. this is a way that they can remain anonymous, hopefully, and maintain this market where China can't go in and shut down one chatting app. They can't go into WhatsApp and say, we're closing this down because we're noticing there's more people talking about the disparities that we press on them in this location or whatever. And I believe, like, talk about this last year that we've gone through, a lot of that has been confusing, to say the least.
You want an anecdote about this? Do you want a little anecdote about that Chinese thing? One of my companies some time ago were a partnership with two gypsies. Because in France we have a huge community of gypsies, people who live in caravans, and they've been legally they've been French for 500 years, but they've kept the traditional way of life. So one of my business partners is a gypsy, and we made a company dedicated to the protection to an inflatable protection of luxury vehicles, luxury caravans and camping cars. I know that you guys in Utah have a culture of camping. When I walk the streets into LA, I've seen so many luxury camping cars, but you guys don't have hailstorms. But in France, we have many hailstorms that basically destroy the vehicle, and it's very expensive to repair. So we've built a special device that you just put on the top of your caravan. You just push a button, and we've invented a technology that basically makes it very light, and you just push the button, and it protects you from the shards of ice that go down from the sky, that fall down from the sky. So I was in China for that. And so I expanded my Chinese vocabulary. I was basically very knowledgeable about all the types of PVC valves that you can put on an inflatable product. That's the type of vocabulary you never use again when you're a translator. And so, since I'm using Gmail, I installed a VPN because I wanted to talk to my wife. I just wanted to send her an email. Hey, honey, I love you. How are you? Those kind of things. So I start Gmail, I start the VPN, and then I forgot to turn the VPN off. A few hours later, one of my customers needed to be contacted, so I start my social media app, which is Weixin in China, which is WeChat. Maybe you heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is that in China, WeChat is centralized, of course, but WeChat is the equivalent of, okay, you put Google, Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail in a blender, and you have WeChat.
Yeah.
And your credit card. You don't, in China, there's absolutely no credit card anymore. There were some 10 years ago, but now you cannot pay by credit card. You can take some money from an ATM, but you cannot pay by credit card. At the shop, you have to have a QR code or cash. So imagine if your WeChat account gets blocked. And this is what happened to me. I started WeChat, and at this moment, I received a pop-up on my cell phone in Chinese saying, "You have been using a forbidden app in the Popular Republic of China."
And that was the VPN.
It was NordVPN that I was using, and then what did I receive? You are now permanently banned from WeChat. So that was my cell phone. If I want to use WeChat again, I have to have another cell phone. But just like that, snapping your fingers, in 1 second, I lost all my contacts. I lost all my numbers, all the history of my browsing history in Chinese.
And at that time, you're in China trying to get a hold of one of your commercial partners.
Yes.
And you're locked out of being able to do that because you used a VPN, because China's afraid of the VPN backdooring their restrictions.
And imagine if I had money on that account, it would have been frozen. And I'm not very familiar with the legal ways to get that money back. But imagine if Facebook does the same thing with the Libra currency.
Yeah.
Again, I'm okay with the fact that Facebook censors something. They have the right to have to express censorship, saying we just want this on our social network and not that. If they were a genuinely private company not taking subsidies, In France, the director of Facebook is a state employee.
Yep.
So it's not really a private company. That's the problem. And that's the same thing with WeChat. So
Well,
I'm okay to-
what about
Yeah.
Patreon? Patreon's done that quite often over the last few years. I mean, their test run was Alex Jones because he was outside
the bald guy.
outside the area of acceptable enough that if they tried all this on him, there wouldn't be too much argument. But when that happened, a few of us sat and said, they're building the template right now.
Gay frogs.
And they did it to Alex Jones. He's a conspiracy theorist guy. And then it's expanded. They've done it to hundreds of people after that. And then that's why you have that what's that other one like Patreon, N-Star or Subscribe Star.
Okay.
And it's a Russian firm, so now our producers have to go to a foreign country to obtain freedom from the country who
The funny thing is that the Russians probably they also have to go to an American country.
they probably have to go to
funded.
Patreon.
Probably.
No shit. I mean, it's crazy, but you know, and I'm not shilling for Alex Jones at this, but you could tell they were gearing that up because not only did Patreon ditch him, but then all of the social medias, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, any of the social medias all jumped on that bandwagon and boom, 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 all at a time to kind of deplatform him. And they tried to ruin him, but he had I think he had foreseen this, or you know, maybe he's really a CIA plant, whatever, because he had his own website servers built. And I imagine at extreme cost to him, but with this system you guys have, it would lower that cost. It would make it so that you can't be deplatformed like that. I still don't know if you could make it to where you could be debanked, like having Patreon taken away from you. But I mean, part of his business model is he makes conspiracy shows and people pay him to watch them. And so now this would make it so that he could still maintain his advertising and sell his vitality pills or whatever he does. And it would be spread out. And a guy such as me and Dave wouldn't have to not just buy a server and build a server and learn how to run it, because I'm struggling with the small stuff I do, you know.
Paradoxically, all these DApps would also make people more accountable. We're currently building a project. We've announced that publicly, so I can talk about it because we've said that on social media. We're currently building a decentralized, uncensorable messaging app, which is named Durabo, from the Latin word "I will survive." And we believe that honest people usually benefit from an uncensorable communication, but it also makes you more accountable because paradoxically, the internet already doesn't forget a lot.
Never.
And these apps blockchain apps do not forget a lot either. So that paradoxically, you would be held more accountable for what you've said. Even if you're a conspiracy theorist saying many things that could be easily debunked, but also if you're a politician saying, "Oh, I never said that," and even outside of the spectrum of politics, it would be a good thing for lawyers probably to track down messages and transactions. I don't know how it is in the US. Maybe Alex, you can comment on that. But in France, if you have a litigious situation with someone, you cannot just show the text messages in court. You have to pay a lawyer to come and testify that this lawyer has verified that indeed this text message has been sent, and it costs you $150. No, sorry, $15, I think, per text message. But if there's a huge conversation, you can have to pay like $4,000 just to prove that your employer, for example, has scammed you. Maybe it can be it can be very harsh if you are on the poor side of the legal battle. Maybe you can comment on that, Alex. I don't know how it is in the US.
I mean, it's going to cut both ways, right? Like a lot of this stuff. Like sometimes I've had clients who had not done something wrong, and sometimes you have clients who have done something wrong, right? It's going to be a mixed bag, and in most legal disputes, it's really it is kind of a mixed bag. Some things are wrong, and some things are kind of wrong, and both parties usually have, especially in like you're talking a civil dispute, there's usually, you know, two sides of the story, and so it is going to cut both ways. But I think that you will be able to it should streamline some of the verification, some of the process of being able to trust what's there.
Wasn't kind of that, remember Aaron Schwartz? Does anybody remember who he was? What's that college educational I don't know, storage space, J something, I don't know. JSTOR.
Yeah.
Do you remember Aaron Schwartz was?
Oh yeah, he built the database.
He built a database. He bought JSTOR and built a database and was giving JSTOR away for free.
Is that for like
books
and stuff?
It's for
academic articles.
Anything. It's academic articles. And what he was doing technically was legal, I guess. I'm shooting off the hip. Remember, a moron is talking right now. According to the way it was written when it was set up, you had to pay for the transportation, the printing and transportation of the article to get from the storage place to you. And once it was put online, it should have been free. And they ignored that part because it was a windfall for students and lawyers. It was a huge service that lawyers used a lot. He built the database and made it accessible and free. And shockingly, the FBI went after him and he ended up committing suicide. And but a service like yours where you don't need a website to manage it, where it's managed across multiple computers, anyone who signs up onto that service, such as say a handful of 40 lawyers want to use that would become, that might put them at danger of the FBI, arresting you, holding you in jail for, I think it was 72 hours while they figure out how they can drum something up on you. I'm just shooting off the hip on the story, but that would make that JSTOR, which has been operating corruptly ever since they put the stuff online, that would make it so that it would bring that more in line with the initial vision of the service.
That's what all this decentralized stuff is for, is to try to get around these enforcement capacities of society to oppress the little guy. If he wants to give away his books for free or start a store that gives away his product for free, why should the FBI
they weren't his books. See, the thing about it at least makes it so that the FBI has to earn it. What it is the government subsidizes these colleges and subsidizes these educational papers and studies. And then with that subsidization, the deal is that people who wanted to access these studies that the government paid for only had to pay for the printing and shipping of those studies.
Right.
Once it went online, there was no more printing and shipping, but not only did they still charge, but they charged more.
Right. And that's how the academia society works.
Yeah.
This is a way around it. Decentralizing things is a way around so many obstacles in our society.
See, I came in thinking this conversation was about one thing, but it's got my mind running on the availability for so much more. And this conversation's going long. We should round it out and cut you guys loose. But I like what you guys are doing, making it so that blockchain is not just for currency. You're making it so blockchain is for whatever you need it for. Do you need it for an internet? Do you need it for such as a family communication storage? You know, is there paperwork, wills, family photos where it not only gets stored on your computer, but it gets bumped to all the family's computer, and it gives them quick and secure access to it, but it also saves it and keeps it safe.
That's exactly right. And just so we can go back and again throw our URLs out there.
Yeah, throw them out again.
Learning about our language, Glow, go check out Glow, GLOW -lang, glow-lang.org for specific details of the Glow language. And for our company, MUKN, or Mutual Knowledge Systems, check out MUKN.io.
Yes, and the links will be in the show notes. It'll be the blue links. You click on them, it'll take you right there. Now, if people want to access this, say they want to open up a whatever, is it available right now for them to access and try to port it into their use?
Yes, it is. If you go to glow-lang.org, you will see an instructions list to install that if you have a Mac OS system or a Linux system, and in a few months it'll also be supported on Windows. We're currently developing Glow a lot, so the next 6 months are going to be very exciting because we're building a more user-friendly interface, things like that. So at the moment, if you want to use that, you already have all the instructions, but we're going to simplify each step.
Perfect.
So that it really becomes very smooth.
I like it. And I like that. I mean, even if you don't plan on using it, you just want to support it, you can add it to your computer and become a part of that storage chain, correct?
Well, we don't have our own blockchain ourselves.
Well,
we're using any block. We're planning to use any blockchain available, but Glow is just a language that you can install. Indeed, hopefully, it'll be stored on a blockchain later.
Yeah, I'm sure I misspoke on all of that because you guys are all talking 6th level. I'm still down here digging with the cockroaches. But
don't whip yourself. You've seen so many different implications. Like, no, really.
Well, that's just my anarchist mind thinking outside the box.
Yeah, that's smart.
But if you're not a developer and you want to help us out, look for us on social media. We're on social media. We're on Discord. If you are a developer and you have questions or concerns or whatever, you can find us on Discord. We're on Twitter. Look us out and ask about us from other places. Like see if they'll support us. If you have a blockchain that you really like.
Perfect.
Ask if they'll go to support it. Help us. That'll help us build the community and build what we need to be able to make these tools broadly available so that everybody will be able to use this at one point in the future.
Well, this sounds like a tool for liberty to me. So I think if you're a believer in freedom and liberty and on whatever, I mean, and it's kind of the future, at least jump over, have a look at it, get involved. If it's not something you like and you like, our dear overlords at Google and whatever her name is, stick with them, but at least check it out. Hang on a minute. We're going to cut this show off, but I just want to talk to you guys off air for a second. And for everyone out there, thanks for joining us. Tomorrow night, we're talking to the Tooele Health Department. They've got a couple guys coming over. We're going to chat about kind of men's health tomorrow night. So it'll be a show for the men and a show for the ladies who love their men. So join us tomorrow night at 7:30. And we will see you then. But I want Gauthier and Alexander to stick around for a minute. I've just got a couple more comments to throw at you off air.
Have a good night, Tooele.
Yes, have a wonderful night.
Thanks for having us.
Oh man, This has been a good show. I loved it.